come in.
Beautiful.
There we go.
Okay, well, let's get started here. So thank you everyone for joining us today. This presentation is titled Implementing Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion in Research Applications. We're co-presenting here. My name is Jenna Ives. I'm a Research Engagement Manager for the Vice President of Research Office. My hair is about shoulder length and brown. I have brown eyes, my skin is light brown, and I am female, and my pronouns are she and her. And Aditi.
Hello, everyone. I'm Aditi Sharma, and I'm the Grant Facilitator for Natural Sciences and Engineering. I work at the Office of Research Services, and today we'll be presenting on implementing equity, diversity, and inclusion in research applications. And we have a great set of panelists. So welcome to Tanya Dahms, Kelvin Ng, and Gwen Grinyer. Over to you, Jenna.
Thank you. So just some quick housekeeping. Please keep your mics on mute until the end. We will have a question and answer period. If you do have questions throughout the session and you don't want to forget about it, please put them in the chat. I'll watch for that as well. And then we'll ask the questions at the end. And I think that's about it. Next slide, please. Okay, so the University of Regina is a federated college. We're on Treaty 4 and Treaty 6, the territories of the Nehiyawak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota peoples, and the homeland of the Métis-Michif Nation. We recognize that as an institution founded by settlers, we benefit from being on this land. We are grateful for the privilege to learn, teach, and work here. We demonstrate our commitment to reconciliation by incorporating Indigenous knowledge and worldviews in our research, teaching, and studies to ensure that there are increased economical, social, and creative opportunities for current and future generations. It is our responsibility to strengthen relationships with Indigenous communities and build more inclusive futures. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we've got three different parts here. Part one is just the foundations of EDI. I'll quickly be going through that. Part two is implementing EDI in research. Aditi will go into that. And then the panel discussion, which is the part I'm most looking forward to. Next slide, next slide. Okay, so EDI foundations of research. So EDI groups in research, intersectional complexities, and EDI barriers and benefits. So equitable representation and consideration specific to the following four designated groups in Canada. So this is what when we're talking about EDI and the main intersectional components of it. So women and gender diverse individuals, including S2 LGBTQ individuals, Indigenous people, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples as rights holders, and that's in relation to our constitutional commitment and in relation to the government. And then, yes, we'll be sharing, I see a question that just went up. The slides will be shared with all of these tune in to tune up sessions. The recording goes online as well as of this presentation, as well as the slide deck, I believe, right?
Yes, it will be posted online. Yep, the recording and the presentation. Sorry, I don't know why it closed there.
That's okay. You know, technology. Thank you for jumping in.
You're good?
Yeah, just all over the place. So the next groups are persons with disabilities and members, and that's including visible and invisible disabilities and members of visible minorities or people impacted by racism, as some call it. So for Canada to lead the pack in global science and innovation race and address key societal challenges, we need to foster a truly inclusive research environment. In particular, addressing complex problems requires a broad range of perspectives and experiences. And so that was on the report of advisory panel on the federal research support systems. Next one. So I quickly touched on intersectional complexities. So EDI groups part of the complex system, barriers and power structures that impact equitability in the research ecosystem. So it's understanding that individuals come in and we're not cut into little pieces, it's all intersecting. So I am a woman, I am First Nations, I have Métis ancestry. I also have an invisible disability. So all of these pieces come together and intersect and all need to be considered. So you can't necessarily only include one aspect. There has to be some considerations for the intersectional elements. So this is just an example of how they all come together. Next one. So why does this matter? Systemic barriers in research. So systemic barriers are defined as attitudes, policies, practices, or systems that result in individuals from certain population groups receiving unequal access to be or are being excluded from participation in employment services and programs through discrimination, racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, and ableism. These barriers are systemic in nature, meaning they result from individual societal or institutional practices, policies, traditions, and or values that may be unintended or unseen to those who do not experience them. They cannot have serious and long-lasting harmful impacts on individuals, such as their physical and mental health, emotional well-being, life expectancy, physical safety, job and financial security, and career progress. So benefits of EDI in research and in training environments: improved access to talent, expertise, improved collaboration, collective intelligence and creativity, different points of view leading to improved, oh, you clicked.
I'm really mucking up your presentation.
That's okay. Go with the flow. I have a second one open here, but I
Okay.
could have had it going as well.
Are we on the right one?
That's the right
Sorry.
one. Thank you. So different points of view leading to improved performance, greater capacity for innovation, enhanced recruitment and retention through effective mentorship and supportive work environments. Inclusion allows for realization of the potential of diversity. So as researchers, and the point of this presentation is how can we implement this into research, into our best practices? So I'm going to hand it off now to Aditi.
Hi, thank you, Jenna. Yes, now we understand why EDI is important, and now let's focus on how to address EDI in our research applications. Now, irrespective of the stream you are applying for, be it NSERC Alliance, Discovery, SHRIC, CHR, NFRF, or CFI grants, all major grant applications have EDI, which needs to be addressed. And there are two sections where it is mostly seen. First is the research plan or design, and the other one is research practice, which involves team composition and inclusive environment. Now, across the streams, they could have, variable names for it. For example, research plan or research design is referred to as feasibility criteria on NFRF applications and as GBA plus analysis for CHR applications. But at the end, the most important thing is that EDI could be a fail or pass criteria for your application. And so it's important that this section is addressed effectively, leading to higher chances of funding. Stacy, next slide, please. So we'll be addressing each of these sections individually. We'll start with EDI and research plan or design. And when we talk about this, we're actually referring to how to incorporate EDI when you're designing your research for executing your research process. And it starts from right from the top, when you start asking the right questions, leading to, how you're designing the study, what are the methods for data collection, how are you analyzing and interpreting your results, and finally, how you're disseminating your results. So let's assume that you're doing a project with an indigenous community. So how will you address EDI for such a project? So you start from asking research questions. Are the questions you are asking important for the indigenous community as well? So that's first point where you address EDI. Then you go to how are you designing the study? Are the indigenous community members just onlookers, or they're contributing to the exact research questions? When you're collecting samples, or in your methodology, are you mindful of the cultural practices, traditions, and beliefs of the community who you're working with? And similarly, have OCAP considerations been taken of how the data will be stored and, how the information will be packaged? And then, when it comes to dissemination of the results, how are they getting disseminated? Is the community participating in analysis and interpretation? And is the data being disseminated in multiple languages via multiple formats, for example, audio, different languages? in a way that it benefits all the communities without harming the interest of the community that is being researched on. So that is the first section, how to address EDI in research plan. And next we go to how to address EDI in research practice. Next slide, Stacy, please. Stacy, thank you. Okay, so when we talk about EDI in research practice, we are focusing on two things. One is team composition, and the second is having an inclusive research environment. And why is it important? Because we want all the team members to feel valued and involved. And when we do that, it ensures that there's a diversity of experiences and perspectives, which is represented on the research project, on the research team, which in turn makes the research more impactful and innovative. Now, when you come to writing this section, the question is, how do you write it? How do you address it in your proposals? And this you can do by asking questions. Okay, so we start right from how to build an inclusive research team. And how do you do that? First thing is being aware of what diversity looks like in your department or your discipline or your institution. Are there any barriers in research? And what measures can you take to mitigate them? If you're trying to get a diverse applicant pool, are your job postings, being widely circulated? And have you considered that, there are biases, there's discrimination, there's a privilege, there's power imbalance? If any of these are present in your team, it will prevent, from team members to, openly expressing their views, right? So if these things are there, how do you address it? Then how do you ensure that all members are contributing to the research objectives? If it's indigenous research, do you have that representation on your team? If it's a patient-oriented research, do you have patient partners on your research team? Because having them there will actually lead to better objectives and method and data collection, sample collection criteria for all the research objectives. Now, the next is, can everybody voice their opinions when it comes to research analysis and interpretation? And how do you identify, what is the authorship criteria? For example, say when it comes to publications, how do you define that? And is there clean and clear procedures? How many networking opportunities would be provided to the team members? What is the leadership criteria? And is financial support available for all members of the team? Now, this diagram which you see here is available from NSERC Guide, and I have linked the figure as well as the text. But you can also see examples from SHRIC and CIHR, which are linked as well in this slide. Now, when we come to EDI and research practice, and we'll go to the next slide, Stacey. EDI in HQP training, that means highly qualified personnel. This is part of EDI and research practice for SHRIC and CIHR programs, but it is a separate merit criteria when it comes to NSERC applications. And this colorful wheel that you see with 10 different sections is how you address EDI for HQP training. So we've already talked briefly about, inclusive recruitment strategies. But then we can also ensure that, there's bias-free hiring. And how do we do that? By giving training of unconscious bias training, to its selection committee members, or having a standardized rubrics for evaluating all the candidates. Then we can have diverse mentorship practices where we provide role models and potential mentors to the trainees. Then equitable resource allocation. For example, the number of conferences each PhD or master's student can attend in a program. So you define that right in the beginning so that every student gets an opportunity to go to an international or a national conference. Then is there flexible learning? Because students can be parents too. They can have other responsibilities as well. So what kind of working flexibility is there? Do you allow hybrid work? Are there daycare facilities where they can, send their kids and work happily in the lab? Then EDI training opportunities, cultural competency training, for example, unconscious bias training, GBA plus training, providing all of these to all the team members so that they're aware of implicit biases that one may have and how to address and mitigate that. Then what about network and visibility? This comes when are we giving equal opportunities to all trainees to go out to conferences, or it is, favored towards one. So similarly, leadership training programs. So when we all come to all of this, these are the things that you can address in your applications. So you don't have to address everything, but we have listed, practical tools and strategies for incorporating EDI in your applications, and you can choose what fits best towards your project. Now, next slide, please, Tracy. So now key takeaways from this is, what you should be doing and what you should not be doing when you're addressing EDI. First thing, never use EDI as a buzzword. Okay, be as specific. Don't use broad generalized statements. Be as specific and as detailed as you can be. Remember, it's all about having concrete practices in place. And then it's not sufficient to say that, well, I've taken my team is complete. It's diverse. I don't need to change anything. When you look into applications, what you need to address actually is that how will you continue to determine that if your composition changes, EDI is taken into consideration. Then applicants must provide a strong rationale if there is a belief that the no aspect of the project or questions or methods or framework or analysis or interpretation, any of those, research design factors, the 5 factors we saw, it doesn't incorporate EDI. There are cases where EDI may not play a role, but then you should be able to, define it with a proper rationale. Okay. Now, do not include any personal information or demographic data for your research team until you have consent from them. Remember, when the reviewers are looking at your application, they are not looking at the EDI profile of your team. What they're looking at is what are the initiatives and measures the team has taken to realize its EDI goals. Now, there might be cases, where you have people with lived experiences as team members, and you might consider in that set of scenario to, give a brief high-level statement in your proposal to their presence, but you do not use or, define it so briefly that, people can actually identify what or who that person is. There's one thing that has come a lot is, that people, when they're writing their applications, they become suddenly defensive or they're dismissive of, having EDI. And that behavior usually does not help in the long run, because that could actually lead to your application being rejected. Okay, next slide, please. Now, what we'll look into next is an example. Stacy, could we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to look into an example of NSERC Alliance and how they rate their merit criteria for this section, EDI and HQP training. And then we'll just do, an example. If you didn't attend the Alliance EDI sessions, which have happened this month and in the past month, we're just going to give you a brief overview. And this also helps you, write your EDI sections in future. Okay, so when we look at NSERC Alliance applications, there are 4 criteria. The first is does not satisfy, then meets, exceeds, and exceptional. So if the applicant is not able to, have specific one listed concrete practice, that is when the reviewers say that the application does not satisfy the criteria, and it's a pass or fail for this. This is the first step when they start reviewing an NSERC Alliance application. If the internal reviewers see this, that the merit EDI and HQP training has not been satisfactorily addressed, that is where the application is rejected right there. So you have to have meets or above for NSERC Alliance applications. Now let's look at meet. Now, this is simple, you have to have at least one proposed specific and concrete action practice to support EDI. So, just a simple example of, okay, EDI training is going to happen. And I'll be seeing that all my HQP are getting unconscious bias training or EDI training in this program yearly. So that is one concrete action. So that could be there, and it comes under the meet criteria. But if you want to get a rating of exceeds, then you have to have, a link between the proposed action and what is the systemic or localized barrier that you have identified in your discipline or your stream. So these have to be linked, and then you can have more than one aspect, how you're addressing it in different ways. So when you do all of this, then you get an exceeds merit rating. But if you want to get an exceptional rating, what you have to do is you have to show that whatever you have planned has already been shown. There's a literature evidence to showing its effectiveness as a proposed action plan. And then you have a plan to, monitor the progress as well as adapt the plan if anything changes for your EDI action. Okay, so now so there are 4 criteria: does not satisfy, meets, exceeds, exceptional. Now you know how and what are the ratings. And now we go to the next slide. And in this, we'll do one example. So just take your time, read this example, and then you see this bar over here at the bottom, which rates whether it's meet, exceeds, or exceptional criteria. Read through it and think, what rating should this EDI section get? We'll take 30 seconds here because it's a short write-up, and then we'll go to, let me just start rating it. So I'll request you to open Slido in the next slide, but take your time, 30 seconds, read it. I have a timer here, and I'll ask Stacey to go to the next slide after 25 seconds now. Okay, Stacey, could we go to the next slide, please? Okay, is it in the presentation mode? It's not showing the question. If it doesn't show, I'll just copy paste it in.
It's just skipping to the next slide, Aditi.
Okay, no problem. I'll just put the Slido details on here. Just give me a second, please.
Sorry. Why it's being so stupid.
Okay, please look into chat, and here you go. Goodness. Okay. If you can see the Slido link, if you go on there, you'll be able to see the question, which somehow is not coming up here right now.
DT, we can't click
Yes.
into that link.
Hold on.
We need like an HTTP or like a full.
Okay. Stacey, do you mind if I can share my screen instead then? Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
No.
No? Okay. Just a second. Okay. There we go. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm just going to go to Slido next. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, we have 16 people here, so I am expecting that everybody will send a reply. We have 2 responses now.
DT, I think there's only actually 8 researchers in the meeting, so
Okay,
your
okay, then
total
we'll.
would be 8. Yeah.
Okay, no problem. Yeah. Okay, so the correct answer for this section is actually does not satisfy. And the reason that is because If you look at it, it's all broad, generalized statements. Okay, there's nothing, no specific concrete plan that has been written here by the researcher who wrote the section. And so this gets a rating of does not satisfy. And since it's an NSERC Alliance application, this is where it will be rejected and you're not going to the next stage. Okay, so now you have one example. Now let's look at another example, and then this is a longer read. So what we'll do is we'll take about 1.5 minutes here. Take your time, read it, and then read this section. And then once again, we'll go back to Slido.
And I just did want to hop in here too to say that these examples are real examples. So note that the examples provided have been adapted from a slide provided during a workshop from NSERC, which in turn were used with permission from the submitted applicant. So they received their approval to use these ones in the EDI presentations.
Okay, is everybody good to go to the next slide and rate it, or do you want me to take some 20 seconds more here?
I'm good. Good.
Okay, then we'll go to the next slide. Please log into Slido again, and you'll see this question. Okay, so we have a tie here, but the actual answer is that this is exceptional section that has been written, and let's see how. Okay, so the first thing is, to meet, it should have specific context, and let's look at this. So it says, sorry, a specific action. So it should be, so we'll draft the job description using inclusive language to encourage applications from underrepresented groups. And then there's a context to it. The context is that the engineering department has traditionally been male dominated. Okay, and then multiple ways this EDI barrier that was observed has been addressed. Okay, and how are they doing it? First is by job description. And the second is to promote an inclusive environment. The team members will give presentations on their backgrounds and journeys, which we all know are so important. And additionally, transparent research practices will be maintained by using a booking schedule. So there are multiple aspects they're addressing it. Why? And then you have an evidence-based approach, which is marked here. If you look at it, they're saying that, which is literature-based. Okay, so this is important that they have references to it. And this we didn't know, until the NSERC Alliance workshop happened, and we realized that this is, something we can do as well. So whenever you have a practice that has been reported in past to act well, please do refer to it in your sections. And here they do to two of them. First, to a blind recruitment process when it comes to job hiring, and then how it is important, that mentorship, diverse mentorship is so important to share demographic or value-based connections. And lastly, they have a monitoring and adapting plan in action. So they tick all the criteria here, and that is why this write-up is exceptional. Okay. So this brings us to the end of the examples and takes us to the third section, which is what we have been looking forward to, and that is a panel discussion with our three panelists, Tanya, Kelvin, and Gwen. And it's great to have you guys here. And let's start with introductions. Tanya, would you like to go first? I can stop sharing my slides here.
Sure. So my name is Tanya Dahms. I'm the Associate Dean of Research in the Faculty of Science. I'm a professor in the chemistry and biochemistry, and I review all the grants that go out of the Faculty of Science.
Thank you, Tanya. Gwen, would you like to go next?
Sure. My name is Gwen. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm an associate professor in the Department of Physics.
And Kelvin, I can't see you there. Could you please turn on your camera and we can see you too? Okay, looks like Kelvin's system is not working right now. So maybe we can start with Gwen. Gwen, so we had a question for each of our panelists, and we're going to start with Gwen first. So Gwen, how will you know if your action plan is working, and how did you adjust your plan based on your monitoring results? Just to talk about EDI and research applications. Oh, Kelvin is back.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
No, no problem.
I just don't know what happened. So my name is Kelvin Ng. I'm actually from the Faculty of Engineering and Applied Science. Thank you for having me. Sorry about that.
Thank you so much, Kelvin. Okay. Okay, so we'll start with, the first question then. Okay, Kelvin, if you don't mind, actually your question comes first in order, so we'll go with that.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So for Kelvin, we had this question: what EDI issues exist in your research, and how do you address it in your application?
Yeah, I think, I just want to echo that, in your presentation, you always, I think in your example number 2, you actually mentioned about engineering, and this is 100% true. So, honestly, we do not have enough female students, and this is not exactly a secret. So, Engineers Canada, which is a organization at the national level, is actually working to increase the representation of the women within engineering through what they call the 30 by 30 initiative. So the whole idea is that they want to improve the number or the percentage of the female engineers to 30% by the year of 2030. So let me share with you, the recent data. I think I actually got the data from 2023, so just the previous year. I think in the previous year, the national average, we have roughly about 20.2%, okay, of the female engineers. And then in Saskatchewan, we are a little bit behind. So in Saskatchewan, we only have about roughly 16.1% self-identified, women engineers. That, of course, meaning that we have, a little bit room for improvement. So this is definitely some of the issues in engineering. In addition to that, we also have, other type of, speaking, from the university type of perspective. So we always want to increase the number of international students, but we realize that the international students only came from a few countries. Okay, so we are not going to exactly have a really diverse environment. Now that partly because of, our, policy at the national level, but partly because there's actually more work that we need to work on so that we can actually attract more international students from more diversified background. And this is quite important because if we keep talking about one specific group or a few specific group, this is not exactly a diversified environment. And I think research actually benefits from people coming from different walks of life. They have different cultural values, they have different background, and then they will actually enrich the overall research environment. So we want to improve in terms of the number of international applicants in engineering, and in addition to that, we also want to improve the percentage of local students. Now, I'm not sure about, in Faculty of Science or, other faculties, but, we do not, get a lot of, local students to go to the graduate school. Maybe some of the reasons, maybe because, they already able to get a relatively stable jobs after their bachelor degree. So they're almost like less interest in working as a graduate students and, to enrich the research environment. So basically, some of the EDI issues in engineering is that definitely we need to, improve the number of female students. In addition to that, we also need to, actively recruit more international students and also, to attract more local students. But again, we're talking about, there's many different groups. So I don't want to specific, our discussion to only, 2 to 3 different groups. But the whole idea is that, we want to try to make sure that it is fully, diversified so that we can able to hear the version of the, or the perspective from different people or from different groups. I think your second part of the question asking me about, how do we actually address this problem? Now, honestly, I do not have a good answer to your question, but basically I can share with you some of my experience. I think one of the most important thing for me is that, to encourage my HQP to complete all the EDI training, because personally, I actually benefit a lot from this type of EDI training. It just opened my eyes to a new world. So I really think that this is super beneficial. This is especially important because, our students actually have, different background. So EDI are not exactly exactly identical to all of them. So every single one of us have slightly different, interpretation of the EDI. So I think one of the things that I do is that I always encourage my students to, to attend all the EDI training. And I believe that, our research office, our university actually provide excellent opportunities. There's so many different training, so many different webinars, sessions. I really, encourage my student to actually able to, at least attend, some of this training. So this is my, the first type of, solution to this problem. Another thing that, I do with my group is that, I try to create a comfortable environment, and sometimes it's easier said than done. So I understand that, my students come from different background and they have different needs and they have different roles in terms of, their family duties, other type of thing. So I try to, for example, I try to celebrate, holidays from different parts of the world. Okay. If they have, some cultural event, if they need to, spend time to do things that, is important to their own identity, I fully support my student to actually take the time. If you need more time or if you have some other type of plan, so try to be flexible with the schedule. Again, I understand that it can be difficult because we all understand that, as a researchers, we have so many different deadlines. We have to submit something today and then, maybe next thing another week, but try to be flexible and try to be, able to listen to the concerns and to the need. That actually brings me to my second point, which is, if you're willing to listen to their feedback, it will actually just help us to create a more comfortable environment. A lot of time, the students, maybe because of the power dynamic, they're not entirely comfortable to share their feelings with their supervisor. So sometimes I even say, hey, you know what? If you're not comfortable, let's have a group meeting without the supervisor. So I'll actually provide you with the resources. If you want me to actually provide you with the food or drinks, you guys can actually have fun. You can talk about your research. You can talk about your life. But in this case, without the supervisor so that they can actually, talk about whatever things that they want to talk about. Then I have the second part of the meeting where that, the entire group there. And then if there's any issues, if there's any, type of thing that we need to, look at it, and then we can actually look at it together. So this is actually my second thing. And the third solution that I can think of is just try to, sometimes it's actually quite difficult for us to recruit students from different background. As I mentioned before, in engineering, or at least for my group, I typically only receive applicants from a few countries. And I this is one thing that I really want to actually, to push it so that, it's more diversified. We have a lot of different countries, different background. So I try to, on my website, I try to, include the EDI statements, those type of things, so that at least, when the potential applicants look at the website, when they actually select the supervisor, they realize that, hey, this supervisor also look at, the EDI component. So that actually help them to actually feel a little bit more comfortable. But other than that, I honestly, I just want to be honest, I don't have any good answers to your question, but I just want to share, the thing that I did within my group. Okay.
No, thank you so much, Kelvin. Those were really important points. And, just talking about diversity, it also reflects intersectionality, when you say that, people come from diverse backgrounds and how each one of them has a different perspective. And then the way you address them, it also covers the way you said you had a monitoring and adapting plan, taking feedback. So yes, those are really great practices. And, it helps all the having an inclusive environment, a good work culture or work environment is the best thing that you can offer to your students and your team, because then they are all working together for the same goal. No, that's a great point. And we'll go to the next question. I hope Tanya and Gwen have some more time. We can extend the presentation by another 10 minutes, but we would like to have you both and, listen to your views as well. And we'll have some 10 minutes for question and answer session at the end. So please keep your questions ready. So for Gwen, your question, how will you know if your action plan is working, and how did you adjust your plan based on your monitored results? So
Okay, this was a difficult question because I don't actually have an action plan per se. A lot of the work that I do in my goals are just to simply learn about the experiences of others and to educate myself and to use this knowledge to be like, a better teacher, a supportive colleague, just a better person. I think the overall point is that I don't do this work so my application looks better or because I get to tick some box. I do it because I have a lot of privilege and because it's just the right thing to do. I find a lot of me learning about it is very academic in nature. It's about doing research and learning about things, and this is what I'm already good at. So if I hear something that I don't understand, or if I don't have lived experience on that specific topic, I go research it and I try to learn as much as I can about the subject. I usually say when I give talks on this topic that, like, I'm a nuclear physicist. That's like probably the most complicated thing that people can imagine to study. So I'm pretty confident that I can learn about other things like patriarchy or sexism or racism, homophobia, etc. And they're not like some separate area of research. I've been immersed in it as and experienced a lot of those things myself personally. So I already know a lot of stuff about it, and it's just a matter of like, looking at it like a researcher would, and do I understand everything about it, and how can I learn more? So I'm glad that you brought up the NSERC guide on integrating EDI, because integrating to me is the key word. It's not something you keep separate. It's not like I do nuclear physics over here, and then on the other side of my desk, I do this other thing called EDI. It's really about weaving it through the research you're doing and the environment that you're creating. So I guess what else do I want to say? Yeah, I've with research, I think it's clear to a lot of us what you do, because we do have a pretty clear research plan. Like, we say we want to study this and that, and here's the dates, and we're going to hire these students by this time or whatever. And so it's easy to monitor because you've put into your research project, a specific timeline and dates and all these other things. And so I just, when it comes to EDI, I think along similar lines, like when I actually follow the research plan, am I doing similar things? Like, am I including EDI in the HQP hiring process? When it comes to research, I think, am I publishing papers? Well, in EDI, am I publishing anything, or am I being invited to give talks on EDI like I would be in research? Is my work getting noticed? So similar questions to research is how I can monitor what I'm doing. I know in research that if I haven't published something in 2 years, I would feel that. I would be like, wow, I haven't actually done anything. So when the same goes for EDI, if I haven't done anything in a while, I would notice like, hey, I should probably, think about that. And so to answer your first question, I know my plan's working if I'm like actively doing and learning things. And if I can actually say, yes, I could put that on my CV, just like I would a typical research milestone. And doing something could be like any number of things. So for me, like research, I try to keep up on current literature and discussion of what's happening in the world. I could say I read a lot of books, and I just finished this book called The Exclusion Effect by Christy Duncan. It's a brand new book. It's about how the sciences discourage girls and women and what to do about it. So I read a lot of these books on all kinds of different topics. I go to talks, I go to presentations. A lot of times that takes me 1 hour of my life is to go and listen to a talk. So it's not a huge effort. I've served on like equity committees and EDI advisory committees. Volunteering is an amazing way to learn from other people. I've organized campus events, national conferences. I've been invited to speak about EDI all over the world. This morning I walked in and I had an invitation to go to South Korea and talk about EDI. I've published my work, EDI work in journals. It's probably more than a lot of people do, but I think everyone should just keep learning, keep up to date, and keep doing whatever works best for you. And if you're new to this topic, I think about it like research. Like you can't just be an expert. You have to start building your own knowledge base. You have to do a literature review. You have to go to seminars, talk with other scholars, find ways and places where you can contribute, join collaborations, volunteer, and keep asking yourself, like, what are your goals and how are you achieving them? And why? Why do you even want to do this work? Is it just to satisfy an EDI requirement for NSERC or whatever else? Or is it because you two want to become like a better colleague and a better person? So if it is the latter, then it's quite easy to integrate it because this is already a part of who you are. You want to learn these things and you want to be a better person. And you're committed to be like the change that you want to see in your workplace. And I do say in a lot of my talks, allyship is a verb, it's an action. You can't just read a few books and self-identify as an ally. Your actions should be recognized by the communities that you're serving. And so I guess to somehow answer the second question, my monitoring process just consists of like, what am I actually doing? How do I quantify that? Like if I went to 3 seminars last month or whatever, how many invitations am I getting asked to do? And also to ask myself, why? Why am I doing this? Am I using my privilege to help others? And have I made a strong commitment to integrate that in my research? And really into the person who I want to be. And then I just make sure that everything that I do is really genuine because it's easy to spot when you're not being genuine. And so that's, I guess, all I want to say on that. So.
No, Gwen, thank you so much. That was a wonderful answer. Yes, it's always be the change you want to see, and actions speak louder than words. So, and if you're not, practicing what you're saying, there's no point of even saying it. So, no, similarly, quantifying your EDI results just like you quantify your research. And yes, weaving EDI practices throughout your proposal instead of just sections, which is, something that I should have said before in the presentation. Yes, you need to integrate it all through the proposal, but yes, those sections need to be highlighted specifically just because they address merit criteria. So you have to maintain a balance, but yes. In interest of time, we'll go to the next question to Dr. Dahms. Tanya, so what are the biggest problems? You have been a reviewer on so many NSERC applications. You have been a committee member for them, and you have also been on Sheriff as a committee member, as a reviewer. So what do you think are the biggest problems that you have seen as a reviewer yourself?
Hey, I actually have a presentation. Can everyone see that? Great.
Are you good to share, Tanya, or do you need me?
Then do the share. Thanks.
Okay, perfect.
So I'm really glad. So a bunch of these points have been brought up. So this will just be fortifying them. But definitely what came through in Gwen's was like people that, oh, sorry, just have to get my mouse in the right spot. If you're disingenuous, it will come through when I'm reviewing. So You might think that you're genuine, and you're genuine in what you're proposing, but the thing is that if you haven't done the homework, if you haven't done the work, you haven't gone to workshops, you haven't talked to colleagues and so on, it does come through, because it's just simply a lack of knowledge. So the next thing, the next biggest thing that I see is things that are just really unverified. So like Gwen said, like do your homework, right? There's tons of literature. There's tons of EDI literature. It's out there, so go find it. And then the other thing that I find is really vague statements. So that doesn't help your case. And we saw an example of this in Aditi's presentation. So you want to set the stage. So well, like, what is the current state of EDI in your field at U of R? Everybody's field is different. It will be, this is going to be different for everybody. So you can't cut and paste. And anecdotal statements are not going to instill confidence in your reviewers. So one example, I paraphrase, but you know, I believe many professors in my field also still have this historical challenge. It doesn't tell us anything. It's not backed up with data and so on. So back up your statements with the literature and different things that you can say. And these actually, most of these just come from my applications. So we already know about the benefits of diversity in science, right? But despite that, we don't have representation in science. And so this is where I go to my society for this information. The benefits of diversity to science, you can go to the literature for references on that. And we know that if you have a diverse set of collaborators, students are going to be drawn to successful mentors that represent to someone that can do something. They're like them, but they can do something in this field. So that's really exciting. And again, that sense of belonging, that's all there in the literature. We know about the statistics on women in STEM, but so for me, it's like really gratifying if I have an all-woman publication, right? Because that's actually pretty rare. So we have 34% of women holding STEM degrees, but we author less than 35% of scientific publications. And then finally, in terms of, so this is going to be different for everybody, right? So find something that you're passionate about and follow it and learn about it. And then, maybe you're interested in recruiting Indigenous students to your program. Then look at the statistics and see where they're at. We only have 1% Indigenous students in the Faculty of Science. So what can you do to make an action plan around that? So the next thing you're going to do is just plan. So what are you going to do that's going to actually shift not only your lab, but ultimately your field? And can you put that in the context of your proposed research? So again, vague statements, not helpful. So to facilitate inclusion of representatives of underrepresented groups in my field, I tried to motivate all my undergraduate students to continue their studies in this field. It's very vague, and it doesn't tell me the how as well. And you want to link it back to an issue that you see in your field. So you really want to be incisive, effective, genuine, and then back it up with the literature. So we know some of these things came up in Aditi's presentation, but again, we can back all of this with the literature as Gwen pointed out. So, use inclusive language in advertisements and interviews, advertise on multiple platforms, attract and encourage diverse applicants. How are you going to do that, right? One of the things that came to me from a colleague was having a lab code of conduct. This speaks to safety, and this is safety in the workplace. What about flexible work schedules or conference supports for caregivers? Those are bookends. It might be your elders you're caring for or your children you're caring for. But that's really important to make people stay and be able to do research in your group, or be able to see themselves doing research in your group. inclusive group meetings, you're respectful, inclusive events, so if you're not going to the Owl for a beer if you have people in your lab who don't drink alcohol. Like, design your events around everybody in your group. Otherwise, it's not going to be inclusive. And I have heard from my former students who've moved on to other groups that they just didn't feel included in those groups because they weren't Canadian. You want to show that you don't know everything. So if you're going to do workshops, do it in a group. Maybe it's your society or U of R, but then discuss that in a group meeting. And everybody is on an even playing field, right? And all of your group members are going to have things to contribute in terms of their experience. And then serve as a role model. For some of us, we can, but it's different for everyone, right? So this goes back to this idea of belonging. So if you can support people in your field who will feel like they belong, based on, your underrepresentation, then be that role model. Point out the everything that we have available on campus, social groups, and so on. And then, in terms of, maybe if you want to attract Indigenous students to your program, well, then do the work, go give talks or do teaching at FNU, sit on committees, like Gwen said, like if you learn from other people by sitting on these committees. And then finally, like, reflect, how are you going to monitor your progress, right? So again, statements not backed by data are not going to have any impact. So I know my EDI plans are working because I receive many applications every year from students outside of Canada. Well, at U of R, we all do. So that it doesn't impact the monitoring, right? So the data doesn't lie. So, and that could be qualitative or quantitative. Maybe you have a small group and you can't do quantitative data. Do some qualitative investigation on what's actually happening. So you can solicit anonymized feedback from your group members. If your group's really small, and as they pointed out in the Alliance webinar, you can get someone else to do this for you. How are you retaining? Are you retaining your group members in the field over time? Did they stay in your field? Are they excited by the field? Did they feel like they belonged to your field? And are they then contributing to EDI in their workplace somehow? So are they being proactive to create diversity within the workplace and inclusion and making sure that everyone has an equitable experience? You can track trainee contributions to publications and the number of conferences they attend. I mentioned that you can, provide monetary support for caregivers or help them find an online conference that they can attend. And then you can also track the overall well-being of your trainees by looking at what does success look like to you? So there's just so many ways that you can track this. But the bottom line is, if we are working towards EDI, it is really the intersection of equity, diversity, and inclusion where excellence lies. We know this. So these are not just boxes to tick for a grant application, and reviewers can tell when you're just ticking boxes. So that's all I have to share.
Thank you so much, Tanya. This was very informative once again. And yes, you can always, monitor by retainment numbers. If you're recruiting, but you're not retaining, if people are quietly quitting, something is wrong. And it's not like, if you have a diverse team, it is inclusive too. No, they're two independent things. Just being diverse enough is not being inclusive enough. So, you have to see that what are the practices you're doing? Are you doing team building activities to, build that kind of a work culture? Are you celebrating, like festivals or things that are important to people together? Those all small, these things make a big difference. And the most important thing is, if you experience good work ethic, a good work culture, and you've experienced this and it becomes a part of your training, you actually take it forward to the next place you go to. So, this becomes a part of you. Okay. And